to GONKCAST, a long-form discussion podcast about the music of English electronic duo Autechre, album by album, EP by EP. I'm Gabe.
And I'm Dan.
And this episode, we're on to 1995 with Autechre's third LP, an undisputed all-timer, Repetae, plus two of the more celebrated EPs in Autechre's entire discography, Garbage and Anvil Vapre, also from 1995. I've got to start once again by saying thank you to everyone who's listened, subscribed, told a friend, and given us a 5-star rate and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you're a first-time listener and you like the show, we'd really appreciate it if you did all or some of those things, especially that 5-star rate and review. Also, thank you so much to everyone who's emailed us since our last episode. We're going to work a few of those emails into the discussion today, but we got so many that we've decided to record a little bonus episode devoted entirely to your opinions and hot takes next week. That means you've still got plenty of time to tell us how you feel about Repetae, Garbage, and Anvil Vapre, so email us, gonkcastpod@gmail.com. Of course, you can also send us your thoughts about our next topic, Chiastic Slide, Envain, and Sickly Sweet. And in fact, we're a little unsure if the Sickly Sweet EP counts as an essential release that we should cover. So email us and let us know, gonkcastpod@gmail.com, or tweet us at gonkcastpod. You'll find all that contact info in the show notes of every episode. From what I understand, that Sickly Sweet EP is not actually related at all to the track that it purports to be remixing. So I don't know. I'm kind of curious, but yeah, let us know. If we should cover it for sure, and maybe what you think about it as well. Okay, enough preamble, and on to the main event. Dan, what background info do we need to know about Repetae?
Yeah, so Autechre and, of course, Warp Records released Repetae on November 6th, 1995, which means that the 25th anniversary is just 2 weeks away here in the U.S. However, Repetae wasn't released until March 16th, 1996, when it was packaged by Wax Track and TVT Records with the Garbage and Anvil Vapre EPs as Repetae Plus Plus, but we'll get to those a little later. Also, I'm sure everyone listening already knows this, but a sticker on the cover of Repetae famously expresses Autechre's preference for the vinyl version of the LP. The CD sticker says incomplete without surface noise, while the vinyl sticker says the opposite.
Yeah, we'll get to that a little later as well. In regard to reception, I think it's fair to say that Repetae is widely considered to be a highlight of Autechre's discography and electronic music as a whole. AllMusic gave it a whopping 5 stars out of 5. The Edgelords over at Pitchfork gave it a 9 out of 10. And it's currently the highest rated Autechre album on Rate Your Music with an average rating of 3.79 out of 5. Technically, Repetae is tied with LP5 and Confiel, but it has way more ratings, so by Rate Your Music's rules, it wins. Maybe we should pause to hash this out a little bit, Dan. What is your sense of Repetae's status? I mean, do you ever hear people bad-mouthing it?
I don't think so, I mean, maybe outside my wife, but
yeah.
No, I've always felt like that is, one of these sort of undisputed classics of the, 90s Warp Records scene. I know it's one of the, early electronic records I ever heard when I was first getting into that kind of stuff. I did a little reading, through people's opinions on Rate Your Music. And, it's overwhelmingly positive, but you do have your hot takers. There's a couple 1-star reviews and 1.5 just on the, first page. So that surprised me a little bit. I'm a little surprised that the score's not slightly higher, but, you've always got your naysayers.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Autechre is just a little difficult by nature, and all of their Rate Your Music ratings are like, at least half a point too low because of the normies, I guess. But
true, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Repetae is just so classic. It's like so enshrined, in the Mount Rushmore of electronic music that, it's reached that point where you can seem a little interesting if you shit on it. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's like the old the Beatles are overrated. Hot take.
I think it's kind of in that zone, and so I do see a little bit of like, oh, this is the worst Autechre album, and like, okay, that makes you kind of cool and interesting. And I really don't, I feel like Autechre is such a diverse discography that like I understand if this is not somebody's favorite, but I don't know. I think it's fair to say that it's probably at least one of their very best, but we'll get more into that. As always, some of the albums and EPs we're going to talk about will be newer to us than others. I'm guessing that is not the case with Tri Repetae, but how would you describe your previous familiarity and personal history with this album?
Yeah, I mean, like I alluded to a second ago, this is something I got into, very early. I'm sure Aphex Twin, was of course one of the first things I heard. Boards of Canada. We used to go on this like message board site that was for trading music. It was called Yahtzee. And, people would always just make these threads that were like, the 10 best electronic records or the best, records from Warp or something. And I would just spend, and I know you did too, like just a lot of time, like downloading all that stuff and then trying it out, just out of, curiosity. And I found like so much stuff that way. And Tri Repetae is one that I came to, I don't remember exactly, what the thread was or anything, but it was definitely the first Autechre release I ever heard. And, I don't remember never not liking it. I don't want to sound cool like I, loved it from, first listen or anything. But, I don't remember a time when I didn't love it. And, I mean, it definitely led me down the wormhole of the rest of Autechre's releases. And, so it really my gateway into Autechre and, I mean, electronic music and, I mean, honestly, kind of experimental music in general. It's probably one of the first minimalist things I ever heard or anything like that. So I guess I owe it a great deal.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same boat. Probably a big turning point for me. I mean, I must have gotten into Aphex Twin because of, I don't know, some Radiohead shout out or Bjork shout out or something. I know he did a little remix work for her, but that got me into the Warp catalog. And, I quickly got to this record and it was just like, really, really mind blowing. I couldn't even figure it out, honestly, because it's not like as immediately fun as, Aphex Twin or something like that. But it just like, I was just transfixed. Like, I don't know, we'll get into it more, but it's like the opening track, Dale or whatever. We're gonna have to decide how we're gonna pronounce some of these tracks.
I know.
Firmly in the unpronounceable territory with some of these, but the opening track, with that like weird bass groan, that's like running through the, like, I don't even know how to describe what that sound is, but that was like, turning that on for me was like the opening guitar sound on My Bloody Valentine's Loveless, the Only Shallow track or something. It was like one of those like, I've never heard a fucking sound like this. I cannot believe what I'm hearing. Like, it just blew my mind wide open. That being said, I mean, it's a difficult album, and I feel like it was also one of those special records where it was like, I don't know, 6 months later that I fell in love with the B-side. You know what I mean? Like, those like really slow growers, but I don't know. This is one that I listen to all the time. It's like just one of my absolute all-time favorite albums. So unlike with Incunabula and Amber, reviewers are not so bad about endlessly comparing Tri Repetae with Autechre's future releases. I've complained about this on the last couple episodes, but I still want to try, just at first, to talk about the album, as if we were hearing it in November of 1995, right? So that being said, how would you describe the overall sound of Tri Repetae?
It's definitely like a colder, I think, than the two previous releases. The Pitchfork review, it said something like it takes away the cheesiness of Incunabula and Amber, and they're referencing, we talked about it on the previous episodes, how Autechre themselves had said that those two records, were quote unquote cheesy, and I it's like stripping those little things away. I love both of those records, but this really, we're almost getting completely into that, sound design territory. That there's much fewer sounds here that like, I know where they came from. I mean, like you said, that opening, beat on Dale or Doll, whatever. It really is like Only Shallow. It's still to this day, like when I hear that, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm in for the ride. But we've got like a much more like a mechanical, cold, like humanless. We like Incunabula. You talked about how in comparing, we determined comparing to old records was fine. Just
perfectly fine.
Yeah. You described Incunabula. It was like, it sounded like two people, playing a beat or whatever, and then modulating it, twisting knobs and everything. There was still that like human kind of connection to it. Amber has that to some extent, but it's going away. And I feel like here on Tri Repetae, it's either completely gone or it's very close to being gone. We're just building like such atmosphere. It's minimal. It's mechanical. I don't know. What would you add?
Yeah, I mean, like in terms of sound design, I kept mentioning with Amber that it felt like these were once recognizable sounds that have been like twisted out of shape, but you can still kind of like tell that it's like a snare sound that's been like stretched out and like messed up. This is like, these sounds are just kind of built from the ground up for the most part. I think it's like they're just wholly, not just that Dale beat, but like, I wrote down all over the place here, like the bass, the kick on rotar or whatever is like, I don't even know how to describe it. I couldn't even write down. I'm just writing down like, I don't know how to describe this. And like just these sounds that, just wholly newly constructed. It's interesting because in that respect, it feels like sort of a leap forward from Amber, or like a, I don't know, like a fulfilling the promise of Amber in a way. And yet this feels less like, I don't know, if Amber was like a big leap forward, this is a breakthrough. And yet it is kind of a left turn away from Amber in a lot of ways, because it is very percussive. Like it is massively rhythmic. Mm-hmm. It is quite, I don't know, propulsive. I mean, there's kind of like a slow, lumbering feel to a lot of these tracks. And yet the beats are pretty aggressive. They're like pretty gnarly. They're pretty, harsh, abrasive. There's a lot of really glitchy type sounds here that are, I don't know, just like screaming in your face. Like tracks like Stud and stuff, they have this like piercing high frequency that is almost like grating on the ears, And I don't know, you just think of like Amber as like kind of drifting along like this cloud or something. And this is so in your face. It's also so much drier, like there's not that use of reverb or delays or echoes all over the place like there were on Amber. It is like really crisp, like hard cut type of sounds. And it's just like, I don't know, it's kind of like bashing you in the head. You know what I mean? It's like very aggressive album.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's like part of that mechanical feel, it's like, I don't mean it in the genre way, but it's like very kind of industrial, like, it sounds like, machines or metal or something, but yeah, you're right. I mean, it really doesn't have like that kind of real lush reverby sound like that we loved from Amber, but it like works. I think what you said is really apt. It really like fulfills the promise of Amber. Amber is a great record, but it's like, I don't know how to say it, but it's a great record, but it just, it's like a 9, it's just not like, it's not fully, a 100% classic, 10 out of 10 kind of thing. And I mean, that's difficult for a band, to follow up, especially like, on a third record, to come and, and fulfill that promise and do something that is so different. But like, really like one ups it. It's so great, I mean, I think it would be so easy for Autechre or anybody to like, sort of lean on what you did previously, especially when it worked. I mean, Amber had decent reviews and stuff. It would be so easy to just keep doing that, and fall into that thing. But I mean, they take such risks, and I mean, they continue to do that their entire career. And I think like, I mean, that's why it's worth doing, a podcast like this on them, because, if we were just getting, 5 more Tri Repetaes after this, this podcast would be boring as hell. Right.
Yeah. And they're going to like leave this pretty quickly, honestly. Yeah. I mean, I feel like, I don't know, some people will strongly disagree with me on this, but I feel like with Incunabula and Amber, Autechre is kind of like, I don't know, really into the whole warp aesthetic, the whole artificial intelligence aesthetic, and they seem to be kind of searching for like an alternative to club music or something, like electronic music that is for close listening or for like messing with your brain and stuff like that. And we talked about how that's cool and that's pretty exciting in the history of music, but I feel like they're just kind of like, okay, well, what would that even look like? Like, there's just nothing to even like, they're like, oh, okay, we could do like, kind of these dense, like drifting clouds of sound, and you're like, are going to kind of listen and search through it and everything. And then it's like, there's this eureka moment with Tri Repetae, which is like, people listening at home also like bangers. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
These tracks are fucking banging. This is the first Autechre record that gonks. This is the birth of the gonk, honestly. And it's like, I don't know. I just feel like it's like where it all clicks into place is when they realize that like, it can be totally slamming and still completely hypnotic and like captivating in a kind of like brain music kind of way. And so I don't know. I love that juxtaposition. I wanted to mention, we've already sort of gotten into like how it compares with the previous work, but AllMusic has this line: it fully confirms Autechre's evolution into electronic noise kings. I mean, I think it's kind of a fascinating thing to say because I don't know, there were like tiny hints of it on Amber, but this is like a big step into the arena of noise. You know what I mean? Like there is like such harsh grating sound that like, it feels like in the world of power electronics or like even like harsh noise, type, there are parts on this record that are just like so abrasive. It's like as if he's sampling a little clip from like Merzbow or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, Amber, I think is mostly devoid of that. I mean, we talked about it. There's the odd, snare sound that's obviously like manipulated or isn't like a traditional, drum kind of sound. But yeah, I don't think everything still kind of stays like in the like melodic, quote unquote, music sort of world. But yeah, I mean, things here on Tri Repetae, stray from that and definitely get in the noise territory. I mean, Stud is the easy track to talk about that. I mean, there's like that slurping, like it's like tape being pulled, like through a head or something. And I mean, just stuff like that is all over the place here. And I think it really does confirm them as electronic noise kings. I think that's what makes them. That's what separates them from the Warp pack, and makes them so interesting. Like as much as Aphex Twin is great and stuff, he's not doing this kind of stuff. He's kind of making those. Everything's sort of fun bangers, or the ambient, kind of works. But I don't feel like anything. He's
still kind of like a composer. Like he composes with music, and
exactly.
This is like composing with sound. It's like. And what's so revelatory, I think, about this album, like the most revelatory thing, is that the hook of each track is the sound of it, which to me is like my favorite part of Autechre. Spoiler alert, moving forward, it's like, you think about like Yuto or something, that huge, the beefiest synth I've ever heard in my life to this day, 25 years later, like that huge, like sliding synth noise. It's not that that's a catchy like melody, it's just that the sound is so captivating. You know what I mean? Like you can't stop thinking about it. And like that bass thing on Dale, it's like, it's not catchy per se, but it's like you are hooked by the sound. You know what I mean? It's such a fascinating difference.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about it on our other podcasts that we do, and I think even on episodes of this, I really like, what I love about Autechre is that like sound design stuff. I mean, I said Tri Repetae is probably like what really was like the doorway to like experimental music and stuff for me. I don't know what it is, but I love hearing like sounds I've never heard before. And when I listen to electronic music, it's not that I'm listening, because, it's like a catchy song, if I want that, I'll listen to, a regular, music. I listen to that, just to either, I mean, in this sort of, artificial intelligence sort of way of sitting headphones, like exploring the sound, layers in your mind or whatever, or, even, you can use it as background stuff too, reading or whatnot. We've talked about doing that, but, yeah, that's like what I love about experimental music, and we talked about it. Like, me and you both make experimental music ourselves and stuff, and that's why I've wanted to do that. Or we always like, or we never, when we like make a song, are we like, this will be 3 4 and we'll do, it's always like,
we're just like tweaking stuff, and then a sound happens, and we're like, that was an awesome sound. Let's like build something out of that. And yeah, I feel like these tracks are totally constructed the same way, and it's like, it's brilliant. Every song has like sounds that I am just absolutely fascinated by. Let me hit you with a couple other lines from reviews that jumped out at me as I was doing some research this week. Sputnik Music says, there probably isn't a melodic note on the whole record. Now, this is fascinating to me because there is obviously a lot of melody on this album, like tons of it, and yet it is constructed in such a way that I really agree. You could listen to this like dozens of times and still think there's no melody on the album. Like, to me, that is an incredible accomplishment. Like, the way these things are built, like, you kind of get what I'm getting at. Like, there's a lot of melody, but it's like hidden or just so seamlessly weaved into the track, and it's like there's so much misdirection in the way these things are constructed that you would be like, oh, I'm just listening to machines. You don't realize how much like actual melody and honestly emotion there is here.
Yeah, no, I think misdirection is a good way to put it. Like, I was thinking, and this is one of the reasons it's so good to like, kind of just lay back and explore like these kind of records. Like, you'll listen to a song, and what you hear up front, if you're not paying attention, is just that machine noise or the percussion. But then there's like some real like sort of angelic synth going on behind it. But it's so like, not even that it's buried, it's just woven so like deeply in there that you can either completely miss it, or just, I think your mind can't put like, with everything else going on, that there could be such a like, like, I wish I could remember exactly which song it is, but there's one, it's like so angelic that it really it's such a strange like juxtaposition.
Yeah, I mean, like stuff like like Clipper has like a lot of, it's got like some string work on there and stuff, and it's got like pretty
I think that's what I meant, actually. Yeah, I think that's the track I'm thinking of.
Grand string work, stuff like Overand obviously has like very pretty, almost Aphexian melody to it. Just lots of like really pretty little touches here. But I don't know, I always think of it like, I hear people describe this album as like, oh, I feel like I'm just listening to a factory or something like that. And and like even you said that it's got kind of like a cold, mechanical, industrial feel to it. And I totally agree. And yet I feel like it also gives me a lot of feelings of like, I don't know, like weird, like despair, or like, this menacing kind of like fear or something. And I think of it kind of like, I don't know, if you're watching a film, or let's say you're watching a documentary, right? And it was just showing footage of a factory, you don't always realize like on a conscious level how much the stuff like the lighting or the way the angles and like the actual shot and like maybe even some background music and stuff is like manipulating your emotion. You know what I mean? You can almost forget that you are still being like made to feel some way about the like pure images you're looking at. I feel like this album works in kind of the same way, which is like just incredible for in the musical world. I think you feel like you're listening to like just this hard, mechanical, emotionless factory sound, and yet there are these light touches of melody and stuff that can easily go unnoticed, but they're like really influencing the way you feel about, because it feels a little dystopian, right? Like a little apocalyptic here.
Oh yeah, I always like, I mean, I love the movie Blade Runner, and this like record sort of makes me think of that. Not like the soundtrack of Blade Runner, but like just the way it looks. It's sort of this grand, cityscape, but then it's dirty and dystopian and beaten down, on the ground level of everything. And this record like really feels like Blade Runner looks to me.
Yeah, I'm just so impressed by that. You feel like you're looking at something with no human input, and yet there's a ton there, and it actually is determining the way you feel. Okay, here's another one from the like a press release that came with the 2016 like vinyl reissue of this album. It mentioned, going back to the group's roots as b-boys, Tri Repetae features 10 variations on street sounds from hip hop and techno to industrial and jungle. That kind of like struck me as strange. I never thought of it in this way, but actually, like after reading that and listening to this a lot more, I mean, there is kind of like a, like I was just mentioning, a eureka moment of like, hey, close listening music can still slap. It's like there are pretty heavy beats that maybe originated from hip hop and jungle and stuff. Like you can almost hear that, but it's been so transformed. But do you still hear that influence at all?
Oh yeah, I mean for sure. I think especially like any of these earlier Autechre records, you could really tell they come from like a hip hop ish background. But here, I think they do such a better job showing it than in Amber. Because I think a lot of these songs, Yuto or whatever, in particular, like really has like a hip hop kind of drum machine beat underneath it. It's just a lot of times like those drum sounds are so warped, manipulated, sampled from things that are not traditionally drum sounds that it's easy to like sort of not see that. But I think like if you took like the beats of these songs and replaced it with like when this weird sound is supposed to be the snare, if you put like a regular snare sound or regular bass drum sound, it would just be a hip hop beat.
Yeah, I mean, I think they could be like broken down in that way. I just think it's so fascinating because, like I was saying before, it's like Amber, maybe they were trying to like escape their roots a little bit, like move forward, and then it's like they just realize here that maybe the best way to move forward is to like stop trying to escape the roots of this style of music and kind of like embrace them and reinvent them in new and creative ways. But it's still got almost like the hip hop spirit. I mean, that's why like this record is so propulsive. It's like the beats are just so, I don't know, aggressive and like just slamming. So some similar notes we got from listener emails. Here's one from listener A. Traeger. He said, Dale was the first Autechre track that really blew my mind. Total cyborg future hip hop. Again, the hip hop mention. And then we got a listener email from Brooke all the way in New Zealand, which is pretty cool. He said, I heard some tracks of Incunabula and Amber, but found them boring. He was kind of walking me through how he got into Autechre. And eventually he says, luckily I stumbled across Dale from Tri Repetae. What I loved was that it was recognizably music to me. I already had an affinity for electronic, but it had this cold, inhuman, mechanical feel. It made me feel like the darkest, grooviest robot apocalypse had descended on the world. It made me dance like a madman. It was so far removed from anything I'd ever heard before, though I already really loved Aphex Twin, yet so immediately appreciable. I mean, it's interesting, right? I mean, am I alone in like, up until this week, I feel like I never thought of this record as like groovy or danceable, but it makes perfect sense, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I think their description is really great, actually. I mean, Dale is like such a good opening track on this record. I mean, we sort of already mentioned it a little bit, but I think it just like just that first sound you hear just immediately like gets you into this world of what Tri Repetae will be, and sets the scene so perfectly. And I feel like if you love that first noise you hear, you're gonna love this record. You're in for such a great ride. I mean, like you said, I mean, just like my Bloody Valentine, I think like those. That's such a good comparison. And
like these dancing just really, I don't know, like kind of frisky like hi-hats on that track that are like super distorted, like they sound like totally blown out, but they're like really extremely high energy. And it's just like you've got this like low bass groan that's just like rolling through the track, and yet the whole thing is like so propulsive, like so high energy. And then you've got those like those like vocal samples. We've talked about how we don't really like when Autechre does the vocal sample thing, and yet here it works in a fascinating way because they're like, it's like chopped up in a very hip hop way, honestly. And it just like, I don't know, it sounds as alien as any of the other sounds here, even though I know it's a human voice. I almost forget it's a human voice at points.
Yeah, exactly. I can't remember what song it was that we sort of complained about that. I think it was something on Anti. It was just like a recognizable voice and just sort of like takes you out of the moment a bit. But here, I think you're right. It is just another sound that's been messed with. Like, yeah, sure, I might be able to assume that it's a human voice, but it's so it's not in your face. It's like woven into this tapestry they've created.
Yeah. And also I want to shout out, I never really appreciate it, but C-Patch is absolutely a banger. I feel like you could play this at the club and like everybody would just love it because it's like it's really fascinating, like sound design wise, and it's actually kind of like playful because they're like these weird stretched out like bending little noises all over your head, but it's really just bumping. I mean, it's just absolutely a delight. We could sort of return to that. I want to talk though about the sort of aesthetic of this album, the cover art or lack thereof, album title, track titles, etc. Maybe this is a good point to introduce something I think we'll talk about a lot in the future, which is something like the mystery of Autechre. I feel like this is such an important part of their appeal, which is like how mysterious it is. The fact that you just get nothing from the, track titles, the album title, usually the cover art just gives you nothing at all. They seem to really embrace this, right? Like performing totally in the dark so that nobody can see their equipment or anything like that. Nobody really knows what they make their music on or how they do it. I feel like they're deliberately vague in interviews and like describe it in this kind of like convoluted way that's like extremely intriguing, but also like, dude, I know how to explain it, but why are you being so coy about it? But this is like, kind of, there's an element of that for sure with like the Incunabula and Amber cover art. But this is the first time where it's just like a weird, monochromatic, like ugly ass brown color with nothing. I mean, just huge barrier to entry, but it makes it weirdly, I really want to know what's inside this thing.
Yeah. I mean, I really like the album cover of this. It has that like alluring quality. Like it's so mysterious and stuff. And then I just imagine in 1995. I guess I had a promo sticker. But if you were in a record store and you look at this, you barely getting any information, and then you turn around, maybe the song titles will clue you in, and nope, not getting much help there either. I like that. I mean the mystery of a band. There's plenty of like bands that I love records from, artists. I love albums, but like when I truly like. The artists I like truly like get super into are the ones that are like interesting. Also, I mean, if anyone knows from our other podcasts and stuff, my favorite artist is Bob Dylan, and like I love his music, but also like I love the like mystery of Bob Dylan. You could. Luckily, he's famous enough that you could. I've read dozens of books and articles, and seen movies and everything. Obviously, Autechre doesn't have that kind of stuff. If anybody knows any books, shoot them my way. Yeah. But like it's still it's like stuff to dig into because you're right. I mean, even the playing in the dark kind of thing. Like I luckily got to see Autechre one time, and it really was like so cool. Like that. It's just. They literally just turned the lights, like there was no they didn't, have a video playing. It was like literally just two dudes standing there in as dark as this club would get, playing music. It's just like such a strange thing. And then, yeah, I mean, the track titles on Try Repetae are like really, Amber, there's a couple, we're getting there, but, they're pretty all pronounceable and stuff. And of course, I mean, things here, Clipper, Stud are pronounceable, but we're getting away from that. We're getting into the file name category. The later stuff and all, like it literally just always seems like it's what they called it when they were making it. But
it feels like a clue or something.
Yeah, exactly. There's always like. Like on Sign, there's like the new record. There's like one song. It's called like the Red A or something. But some of the letter, and it's like, what the fuck's the Red A? It is. It's always like just enough to get you interested, but not enough to ever figure it out. Same way how he said, Sign is a initialism, like but he won't say what they are. That? And it's like,
but it's also like just
it could just be straight bullshit. Yeah, no, I know. Yeah, exactly.
It's freeing because you don't have to like you want to figure it out, but you also know that like it's not possible.
You'll never do it. Yeah, exactly.
So you can just kind of like, I don't know. It's just so in this abstract realm that it's like, I don't know. Like you said, there are some like recognizable words and stuff here, sort of, but that cover art to me is like kind of the first great example of like, you are giving me nothing. And yet, having said that, I was amazed to find, I did not know this until this week, but the inside of the artwork, like the sleeves and stuff inside, there's actually pictures of like weird kind of alien looking machinery. Like it looks like kind of unrecognizably weird gears and stuff, but like kind of like they're old, like they have like dirt and like even like plants growing out of them and stuff.
It's the stuff the Anvil Vapre cover's made from.
Yeah, that stuff, and that sort of appears in that video, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But that's it's a little on the nose, honestly, for Autechre, because everybody, I feel like even without that stuff, everybody would associate this with like machinery and gears and stuff. And I don't know, kind of funny to realize that actually what I thought was like one of the most mysterious and alluring album art ever. There's actually a little bit of a clue of like real world things that they want you to associate with it, Yeah,
that's sort of a thing, we lose in, in the digital age, because you're right, if you never like owned this record, physically, you kind of don't know that. Yeah, I just looked it up on Discogs to see, because I don't like physically own this record, and I don't think I ever had it on CD or anything, even back in the day. Yeah, that's sort of like a thing that gets lost, because I always just sort of would have assumed that the inner sleeves would have just been that same color or different color or something.
Yeah. I mean, so we're getting there. We're not fully there. Surprising that they're giving us like clues of what to associate with and stuff, but I guess for most of my life I just had very little to associate these tracks with, so it's like you get the effect that I get from later Autechre. Spoiler alert again. Let me hit you with a listener email from a listener who goes by Surround Guitari. He or she says, merrily awaiting the two of you to get to Chiastic Slide, where AE go off the quote-unquote slide. Just an interesting note that I've made, possibly obsession, is that Try Repetae, being the third album, could be mangled faux Latin for third repetition or repeat 3 times. I like to interpret this as Try Repetae being the third in a trilogy that share structural similarities, being their first 3 albums, and Try Repetae was the third repetition. It was the last of the early Autechre formula, but with Chiastic, the chains have been broken. We'll get to Chiastic Slide next time, and maybe we can even return to this thought, but it is intriguing that it's kind of like a garbled Latin for, like repeat 3 times or 3 repetitions or something like that. Again, feels like one of those things that's like so close to being a clue, but not really saying anything. But what do you make of like, do you think Autechre was thinking of this like a trilogy or something?
I don't, because, like they said that they didn't really consider like Incunabula their first record, and that it was sort of just compilation of things thrown together for Warp or whatever. I mean, I think this email is exactly what we were just talking about, with this mystery of Autechre and there being these little clues and everything. And I mean, I feel like, it obviously like in some way is like insinuating like three repetitions or whatever. And what could that mean? I don't know. I think the easy thing is
the repetitive nature of the music. Even it might not be a
maybe they mean album. It's their third record, and it's it's one of those things like we'll never know. We'll literally never get the answer.
Yeah, I do just think it's very, very intriguing, and they like to do this for some reason, which I love. Which is like just occasionally like the record, like XI or something is their 11th album, the Roman numerals XI. Or like LP5, it's like they just like to remind you what number album they're on. I don't know, like they're kind of obsessed with that, and fans are obsessed with it too. That is something I wanted to mention though earlier when we were sort of describing the overall sound, is that Amber, I felt like, we talked about that breakthrough of Flutter in that it was like not repetition, but permutation that they were getting interested in. And a lot of the Amber tracks, they do kind of have this like slowly evolving feel. In some ways it feels like Repetae is like a return to the repetitive quality of Incunabula. Hard not to describe this album as repetitive. And yet the structure of the songs is really interesting because like, Incunabula is like, okay, you get the whole thing and then you get a breakdown and then things slowly piece back together and then you get the whole thing again and it usually ends that way. This is like, every track here just seems to like slowly unfurl, like you are not hearing the full track until the end. Like it keeps repeating and yet it keeps growing and growing. And like, there are these little melodies where it's like on a lot of tracks, honestly, but it's like you're hearing like sort of a more minimalist version of them early on, and then they slowly become more melodic and more emotive as they move on, and then it's like quite beautiful by the end. I don't know, it's like a really interesting way to construct a song. I mean, do you and I should mention there's lots of little variations within these repetitions, but does it strike you as like a return to repetition in that way?
Oh yeah, a little bit. I can see that. It is sort of like a return to that form of Incunabula, but definitely like, in a less amateur way. I don't mean that in a bad way, but
it's not so formulaic, I guess.
Yeah. We talked about that in the Incunabula episode. Like it does like sort of suffer from being, you kind of know what you're gonna get on each track.
They're structured like songs, it's like
exactly.
Build up to the chorus, then a breakdown, then like another quote unquote chorus. But this is just like one big thing that's slowly revealed to you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like all these songs, or most of them, unfurl in the process of repeating, which is like super minimalistic kind of system.
It's also interesting how they like seem to like grow in intensity as they go on. This is something we can talk more about. Is I want to get into some of the tracks now, and I want to ask you what are the best tracks to you. But first, let me quiz you as always. There are 3 bolded tracks on Rate Your Music. The highest rated tracks on Rate Your Music. What do you think those are?
Probably Dale.
Okay.
I'm gonna go Clipper and Radio, the last track, maybe.
Oh, actually, it is Dale, Clipper, and Uto.
I almost went Uto, but I wasn't.
Yeah, I thought you were going to get it this time. That Radio, Rizdio or whatever is at 4.0, so I feel like it could be bolded any second now. Maybe I should jump on and give it a rating. But what are your favorite tracks here?
My favorite is Stud. I just...
Okay.
I love how minimalistic and crazy. I feel like this is the real experimental meat in this record. That like I talked about that slurping tape noise. I just love that sound. It's so cool. You talked about that like that high kind of piercing sound that's throughout it. I hate to say I like it because it's like one of the more challenging songs, that makes me seem like pretentious or whatever, but I guess I kind of am. I just I really like that track the most, I think.
Yeah, maybe that's a good opportunity to talk about this kind of incomplete without surface noise thing. Stud is one of the glitchiest tracks here, I think. And I downloaded like a vinyl rip with some like extra surface noise. I know people usually try to get rid of that for these vinyl rips, but I don't know, to try to like get a sense of it. And I don't know, it's like, this is the portion of the podcast where like Gabe overthinks it. That's what we'll do each week here. But it's kind of profound because the surface noise, you can't tell when you're listening to a track like Stud, you cannot really tell what is surface noise and what is, just the glitching and stuff on the track itself. And when I say glitch, it's not like what we think of as glitch today, like, which is usually digital glitching. Like, this is very analog sounding glitching. Like, it sounds like it sounds like weird sounds of like when you plug in a cord wrong, and it's like buzzing and fizzling. And when you like hit, you like turn off an amp or you turn on an amp and stuff, and it like makes like a weird, pop sound and stuff. Like, you hit the pause button and it like kind of the track like kind of like, if you're working with tape, like kind of like comes to like a hard close, stop or something, slow down and stop. It's like, those are the kind of sounds that this is constructed from. And so when I think about that surface noise thing, it's almost like blurring the lines between the medium and the music, and it's just fascinating to me because when I'm listening to this record, it feels like, again, overthinking it, but like, I feel like I'm not listening to music, but that like my sound equipment is malfunctioning sometimes, like it's just popping and fucking up. And I'm like, it feels like I'm listening to like I didn't put a record on. I started like a sequencer that's now fucking with my shit, and, I don't know. It's just kind of like, it almost makes you think about it. We think about like this record is like, oh, you're listening to machinery, you're listening to a factory or something. I start to think about like, I'm listening, whenever you listen to music, machinery is making that music happen. Like all sorts of like chords and things like that. Obviously I'm overdoing it here, but you get what I mean? Like it makes me sort of think like on a meta level about like the machinery of how music is made or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think like definitely the surface noise, thing that they're talking about is that analog sound, and I think like the degradation of a record, if you play it on vinyl, every time you play that record, it's in some way degrading. So the surface noise is never going to be exactly the same. It's never going to. It gets worse over time. The way you take care of it will change it. It like kind of makes it where every copy is sort of unique, and I think like
right.
that, I mean, that could be true for anything you listen to, on vinyl, but I guess I understand like why that's, if that is their intention, they're thinking about that, that is definitely lost on a CD, or even, like you said, you downloaded a vinyl rip, that's never going to actually change.
Always going to be the same.
You've just digitally added that distortion in there. I mean, not only that, but when you play a record, like your turntable is different than my turntable. Your stylus is different. I mean, your speakers are different. Your amps different. There's so many like variables in that system. Whereas when you listen to something on Spotify, of course if you've got better headphones or something, but there's it's much more limited. Your sound card in your computer, or but if you're using your cell phone, I mean, if me and you use the same pair of headphones, we're basically going to hear
we're having the same experience,
literally the exact same thing. But if we both owned a copy of this record, however minute it is, it is a different experience, and I think that's cool. I mean, that's a for an electronic band, to like be concerned with like such a an analog kind of thing is kind of cool,
Yeah, to be like concerned with the medium. I mean, it's profound because that's where like electronic music kind of comes from, which is like, really like crossing wires and
of course,
like tearing stuff apart and fucking with it, and and just like manipulating equipment to make sounds it wasn't supposed to make.
Exactly. That's exactly what a synthesizer is. You're like literally just taking an oscillation, a hum, and manipulating that to sound like music or an instrument,
Yeah. So I like appreciate that this record makes me think about that. I also, though, I feel like it's almost like fundamental to the record itself, and talking about like, some of my favorite tracks here. I feel like I've listened to this album so much that like my favorite tracks have changed a lot, but these past 2 weeks, like the ones that were really sticking out at me was that little stretch between like Letterell, Rotor, and then Stud, as you mentioned. And I just love like, if you think about listening to Machinery, it has that same feeling of like physical machinery in the sense that it is like creaking and warping and like never the same,
Yeah, exactly.
Same way with a record. If you were like in a factory and you were listening to like this, just welding arm like moving and working, it would never sound exactly the same because it's an analog piece of equipment. It's always going to sound a little different, based on the air pressure, based on the angle, based on the whatever.
Yeah, and I mean,
feel like this record,
that's the exact same way like a synthesizer is too. I mean, like literally the temperature it's operating at changes it.
Right. And I feel like this record like has that organic feel all over it. I love like on Letterell, there's like this kind of woozy metallic sound, like kind of layered into these kind of sweeping strings and this like really high pitched like whir, which is an amazing arrangement choice on its own. But that like woozy metallic sound is like, it's kind of like pulsing and warping, like in a very like organic way. Like I think about like, I love like, I don't know, like Sun or Boris or something. Like when you listen to that kind of drone, you're hearing like they could never play it exactly the same way, right? Because it's like woozing and like pulsating and like different sounds are affecting each other and like the amp is like shaking and warbling. You hear all that like little granular detail. And I feel like you can hear that in tracks like this. Like Rotar has this kind of like, I don't know how to describe it, but like a weird little creeping, I don't know, the low notes on a harpsichord or something. It's pretty like woozy and dreamy, but it's like, you know what I mean? It's like pulsing and like shifting shape, like in the same way that like a guitar drone would.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I think that, it is exactly like sort of what they're going for with this record. That when you talk about like Boris and Sun and stuff, like, that you're listening to it and that amp noise is like really like the amp becomes an instrument in the music. Like what's kind of interesting here is like they're doing something so similar, but like, we talked about a little bit like how it really doesn't have like reverb or, it's so like kind of dry. Like it honestly, like the like recording itself almost sounds like it's just, not played on an amp or anything, like it's just directly, plugged into the recording equipment or something. And right. It's like really kind of neat to like, when you do that kind of sound, I think it probably is actually played on amps or whatever, from interviews I've read. But, when you do that, like sort of, kind of like really sterilized kind of sound, that's generally like you're getting rid of that like organicness of it, and a lot of electronic music does that, and does it to good extent. But I think like it is like such an interesting thing on this record, where they're really like mixing that industrial like thing, but it's not sterile, it's like I said, it's like Blade Runner. It's a dirty mechanical industrial thing. This isn't like a the factory that's building computer chips or something. This is a car factory or something, some steel and dirty.
One of those like weird God, what's that word? Like these like weird dystopian movies, how they're always kind of like cyberpunkish, like it's archaic equipment or something. I was just watching.
Oh yeah, like it's anachronistic. Like
yeah. I was just watching Brazil. Have you ever seen that?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, that's a good movie.
Yeah, it's like it's kind of like it's kind of satirical, but it's like this weird, creaky, shitty equipment, like as if, as if it was the future, but it's like way shittier. But yeah, so I don't know. I love that. I love like the creaking weirdness of this. It's got almost like a warm analog feel to it. That's, it's interesting to note that, when I was just like knit, I was thinking like, God, some of like the pretty little synths on this have such a like nice organic woos to them that like, Boards of Canada must have been loving this track, and it's like their first, like, I guess, real proper release, Twoism, comes out the same year, but it's like interesting that a lot of this kind of captures that same like warm analog feeling I get from Boards of Canada, even though it's like much more cold and mechanical and sterile. And I also wanted to highlight like the last track, Radio or Rizdio, just because, again, with that like organic feel to this record, it's kind of amazing that it's got like this kind of like snake-like riffs, like kind of like just all twirling around each other and stuff, and yet it kind of like builds in intensity. It's a pretty repetitive track, but it like keeps building in energy. It reminds me of like when Swans plays the same riff for like 25 minutes, or like $75 Bill or something, even like some Can jams, like, isn't it kind of amazing that they can like build just the pure intensity of this track over the course of it, where at the end you feel like, ooh, like that was exhausting, because I'm so high, high strung by the end of it.
Yeah, that's a great track, and I think it's a great closer, like for that that very reason. It's 10 minutes, a little over 10 minutes, and you're right, it's so repetitive, but building and building and building and building. It's very kind of Swans-esque. And I think there is like one of those little clues we talked about in the title here. I always thought, the A and the S on the keyboard are right next to each other. So I always felt like it's just, somebody did a typo. Yeah. That's why I call it Radio, because I think it's just a typo on it, but maybe not. Little clue.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. What about the weak points, if any? Let me quiz you. What do you think is the lowest rated track? There's one that's like a little, considerably lower than the others. What do you think that track is on Rate Your Music?
I think it's Stud.
Well, actually, it is Knit.
Oh, okay.
What do you think of Knit?
I wouldn't. I really wouldn't guess that it's the lower one. I like it. I don't think it's a standout in any way, but I don't get why it's lower than anything else.
I think it's a really interesting track because it's got like a very it's like, it sounds like a machine like sputtering, like malfunctioning or something. Like it's like trying, like you imagine like this was supposed to be like a nice song, but your equipment is like fucked up, so it's like everything is not working, and just like the synth, something's messed up with it, you got to repair it or something. It's like the whole track is like built out of that. Again, back to my like over the top theory about like listening to the machinery of how music is made. This feels like a malfunctioned song, like it was supposed to be something else, and we're hearing the failed attempt or something. But I think it's fascinating. I guess not a standout. Are there? I don't think I can even pick a weak point here. Like I just love every second of this record. Do you have like something that jumps out at you as a weak point?
Only if I'm being like a little picky. And it's basically, I really agree with the email that we got. So if you want to just go into that, I think he explains it pretty well. And I actually that is my weak point.
Wow. Okay. So I wanted to, read this email from listener Blue Shades, who says, you guys kind of touched on this in the Incunabula episode, but one of the main reasons I love Autechre is the sound design. So if there's a song that has a very basic sound, it totally ruins it for me. For example, I want to like Yuto so much because the synths are amazing, but the drums are just so basic, it totally kills it for me. Garbage Mix is similar, but not as bad. Those snare rolls that come in kind of kill the song for me, and it really doesn't help that they're mixed so loud. We'll get to Garbage in a minute, but I'm amazed you don't like Yuto.
It's not that I don't like it. Like I said, I'm being picky to find the weak point, and I think the weak point. I completely agree with him about those drums. It is. You've got some of that cool sound design, like really sort of atmospheric synth going on, and then like really, you're getting the most like basic, just drum machine on the entire record here. It's like literally just, it's in 4/4 time, best I can tell, and it just sounds like a drum machine, you know, like the snare sounds like a snare, the hi-hat sounds like a hi-hat.
Sounds like a drum kit, like an actual pretty tight like drum kit is being played.
Exactly. And then partway in the song it switches to like 16th notes on the hi-hat, and it just like I don't know, it's just the most like normal kind of thing on the record. And I don't know, like if it was on Incunabula, I think it would you know, it might be one of the better songs there or whatever.
Man.
It just feels like it just feels a little a bit of a step below the rest of the record here, I think.
Wow. I am shocked. I love Utah. It's like been one of my favorites since way back when I first listened to this album. You know, I never really thought about it because I think the track as a whole works so well, but until we got this email, I didn't really like recognize that, yeah, it is a very basic drum sound. It really does sound like a drum kit. It's like a very tight drum kit, but you know, the more I thought about it, I was like, well, why doesn't it bother me then? You know, I just think it works because the focus of the song is that like massive synth. I mean, just again, I said it before, but like just the most beefy, like massive synth I've ever heard. It is like an endlessly amazing sound, which, you know, Blue Shades acknowledges, but it's like, I feel like if you had like this really glitchy, like abrasive, you know, beat, like it would detract from the feeling you get from that synth. Like you almost need like something to really stand down, and it almost emphasizes like the distance between this like absolutely crushed wall of synth sound and then this like really tight, like simple little drum kit. You know what I mean? Like the gap between those two things is stunning to me.
The beat itself, I think, is fine. You know, because I agree, you know, it being like sort of a simple, you know, thing, I think works with that juxtaposition, but I just feel like they could have picked, it doesn't even need to be like some crazy drum thing or real glitchy or something. I just feel like they could have picked, you know, better drum sounds, like, you know, just more interesting, like ones that don't just sound like a drum kit. I mean, because there's really few other places on this record that like legitimately sounds like just, you know, a regular old kit. And
yeah, but this is something I kind of like about this record. It's kind of rare, but like, you know, I was noticing on Clipper, for example, like there's that kind of high synth melody thing that comes in that's like do 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 do. You know, it's like extremely generic acid techno sounding, and somehow it like totally works. Like it just is like fit into this absolutely alien track. We didn't talk about Clipper really, but like that was another kind of like My Bloody Valentine only shallow moment for me. Like that, how the whole track like almost came to a stop, and then you got this like huge sweeping synth noise. Like, holy shit, what a way to build a track. But you know, that like weird acid techno thing is like totally, I mean, you could hear that same sound on a million records from the early 90s, and yet the juxtaposition within this completely alien track to me is like amazing. And it actually, so it makes the rest of the track feel more alien to me, but it also kind of like makes me appreciate the roots of these sounds, like how, you know, it reminds me of those like hip hop b-boy like roots and everything, and like the acid house and the techno and everything, and it's like I don't know, I like the juxtaposition there. I love the juxtaposition in Utah. You know what I mean at all?
Yeah, I mean, and I agree. I mean, like I said, I'm really just picking it because, you know, the podcast isn't interesting if there's no criticism. You know, if we just gush over it. You know, I mean, I think this is a 10 out of 10 record. You know, which, you know, by that very thing means that it's a perfect record to me. You know, but like I said, you know, it just. If I have to pick something, you know, I think that those kind of things are the closest things to shortcomings that we've got here.
Yeah, well, this might be like my gushiest episode in the entire series, which might explain why we're already going way longer than I wanted to.
Yeah, I just noticed that.
Some of these episodes are going to be long. There's nothing we could do about it. Finally, I wanted to ask, you know, about the sort of sequencing, the cohesion of this record. It's kind of a weird thing, isn't it? That like the A side is just 5 like juggernauts, like lumbering kind of juggernauts, and then Utah, the kind of energy picks up a lot, and the tracks get a lot shorter and like just breeze by one after another almost until we get to, I mean, things settle down a lot in Overhand, but until we get to Radio, which is kind of back to the early style of the record. But that's kind of like a weird sequencing choice, isn't it?
Yeah, a little bit. But I mean, this record is really on 2 discs. So really there's an A side, a B side, a C side, and D side. So I think maybe it works a little better like that. I'll just say what it is. It's Dale and Clipper are the A, Littrell, Rotar, Stud, B, Uto, CPAC to Knit, C side, and then Overhand and Radio on the D, which I think works.
Well, still, then the C side is like just a little blitz of the shortest songs by far. Yeah,
I mean, honestly, it may just be because to fit it, I could have done this earlier, but the math of the record sides, it might just sort of work out that way. But I think overall the sequencing is decent. You know, I think it's like the record in and of itself has this like really built sound to it. It feels very cohesive. I think Dale is in a perfect place. Like we said, Radio I think is a perfect closer. Sure, you could probably move things around. I think that whole C side, Uto, CPAC, Knit could, if you switched any of those around with each other, I don't think it would change things too much.
I think they lead kind of nicely because like Uto and CPAC are pretty like danceable, high energy, and then Knit and Overhand like kind of like mellow us out a ton before we get into the big finale. But I don't know, it's just, I mean, I think it works. I wouldn't change a thing about it, but it's like weird how once you get to track 6 you do kind of like change the vibe quite a lot. But in a way it's kind of like, I don't know, if every track was like an 8-minute like lumbering beast, it might get tiring, so it's nice to have like that little sprint until you get to the finish. I don't know. It's an interesting choice, but I feel like if I tried to mix it around, it would all pale in comparison to what they came up with here. And maybe you need that little burst of energy. I did want to mention before we move on that there is a Japanese bonus track, Medri, which I listened to for the first time yesterday. And I thought it was awesome. It reminded me of Knit a little bit, but like honestly kind of cooler. I don't know. I think, we didn't really want to address it because we're talking about it as the album as an album, but have you ever listened to this track?
Yeah, I saw someone send it to us on Twitter. I hadn't ever heard it before, so yesterday was the first time I listened as well. I just went through it a couple times. YouTube that streams in 192, so I can't be dealing with that. So I didn't want to go into too much, but I did like it, and it really made me, next time I'm bored at night, I think I'm gonna hunt down all the Japanese bonus tracks that I don't already have, because I don't know how that slipped by me. And someone on Twitter told us a few other ones.
I was thinking we could do like we'll do some kind of like bonus episode on like all of the Japanese bonus. We'll rank all of the Japanese bonus tracks or something like that. It would be fun. Okay, I wanted to talk a little bit about again, we're running long, but there's so much to say about the context of this record. I always like to kind of do the record first, and then we can kind of zoom out. We've pretended like it's 1995. We could zoom out a little bit now. But, there are a lot of electronic classics that come out the same year. They all seem to be going in kind of different directions, as we talked about last time. In 1994, it seemed like a lot of these big releases were almost in the same kind of ambient territory, but now they're like all kind of branching out. So you got like Aphex Twin's I Care Because You Do, Left Field's Leftism, Mouse on Mars's Aeora Tahiti. I don't know how to pronounce that, but I love that record. The Black Dog Spanners. These are just a few. There are quite a few more. I mentioned that Boards of Canada hits the scene with Twoism. So that was kind of interesting to note, just that nothing, I don't think any of that sounds much like Try Repetae. Another thing that jumped out at me, though, is Bjork's Post, which is like probably one of the best albums of this year. And it's obviously not the first, not the first time that like electronic music and alternative, pop are colliding or whatever. But I do feel like this might be the first time that you start to see the influence of Warp specifically, like Autechre, which will become huge. I just wanted to kind of like, bookmark this thought because it's something we'll definitely talk about, by the time we get to like Kid A and stuff. Like Autechre is a huge influence on one of like the biggest, bands in the world and everything. And, just interesting to note that you can sort of hear it here. Another thing that jumped out at me is Oval's 94 Discount comes out this year, and Pansonic's debut LP, when they were Panasonic, Vecchio, or however you pronounce it, those both come out this year. These are kind of like two really iconic glitch artists, and I feel like Tri Repetae is very much in this glitch wave, we mentioned it earlier, but Autechre does not stick with the Tri Repetae sound for long at all. But I wonder if they did, do you think they would be like an Oval or a Pansonic, like titans of glitch specifically?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, when you look at these two lists, you put together, I think Tri Repetae fits way more in the Oval Pansonic list than they do, Black Dog, Aphex, and all that. I mean, I think that's one reason I love this record so much. I mean, Oval's 94 Discount is like one of my favorite records. It's definitely one of my favorite electronic records, but right. I love it just as a record. I love Pansonic. That'd be another fun band to do a podcast on.
Hey,
going through the whole thing. But I think definitely like Tri Repetae like stands along with both of those records and both of those groups, later records even. So yeah, I think they definitely, if they stuck this out, I think they definitely would be in that, Pansonic Oval kind of territory.
Just funny that we don't really think of them like, you don't think like, oh, Pansonic, Oval, Autechre, in the same group. But if you're just going off Tri Repetae, I mean, you almost should. You want to talk about like feeling like you're listening to your your music equipment malfunctioning.
Yeah.
Oval and Pansonic are like the absolute kings of that. Just interesting to know what's going on, and we'll continue to do that. But let's put a bow on this because we still got to get to Garbage and the Anvil Vapre EPs. How did it go revisiting Tri Repetae these past 2 weeks? Did you have any new thoughts, revelations?
No, I mean, it was super fun. It's I was really looking forward to it. Usually when we finish one of these, I take a day or two and listen to, kind of what I want to, before getting back into, digging into things. But I literally, as soon as we finished, recording that night, I listened to Tri Repetae when I went to bed, and, I absolutely love it just as much as I always have, and it really had been a little bit of time since I got into it, because when I go to Autechre, nowadays I tend to go a little later in the canon. I like XI a lot. I did go to LSEC and stuff this week a little bit, just out. I always try not to, but I couldn't do it. So it had been a while, but I mean, I loved it just as much as I always have, I think.
Yeah, I did too. I mean, I feel like I found a new appreciation for the kind of like slappability of this record, like the hip hopness and like the grooviness that some of these listeners mentioned. Wasn't something that would have come first to my brain, but maybe just like coming off of Amber into this, I realized like what a strange left turn it is actually, and it's like they were maybe like not embracing their strengths as much as they could have. Not to like say anything bad about Amber, which I love, but it's like this just feels like okay, they stopped trying to like be something they're not. They stopped trying to like run from dance music. They just figured out a way to totally reinvent it, and I just appreciate that a lot more this time. I don't know. The question that everybody always has to ask, which I don't even like to ask really, but think about like hints of future Autechre buried in Tri Repetae. I honestly feel like, and we'll return to this obviously as we move forward, but I just feel like Chiastic Slide is a little bit in the same realm, but that they kind of like veer in a totally different direction. And in my opinion, it makes Tri Repetae like more special, because it's just kind of like this singular thing. I mentioned like they might have been considered icons of glitch if they had stuck with this. They didn't. And then you just get like this magical little thing. Like, you know what I mean? Like when you want to scratch the Tri Repetae itch, you can't listen to anything but just this one, just Tri Repetae. That's all there is that has ever made this exact kind of like vibe and sound,
Oh yeah. I completely agree. And I'm glad that they didn't just keep making Tri Repetaes. And I think that's why they become, such titans of electronic music and stuff. I mean, I like Oval and all, but he's kind of stuck in this thing with if you just want to hear, what Oval's about, 94 Discount is the way to go. He's got other records I enjoy, but
right.
you start there, and that's the only one I think that is a must hear kind of thing. Whereas Autechre continues growing, changing, and releases a lot more must hear kind of music.
Yeah. Well, we ready to talk garbage?
Yeah. On February 27th, 1995, less than 4 months after Amber and a full 8 months before Try Repetae, Autechre released their third EP, Garbage, once again with Warp Records. Reportedly, this EP is comprised of leftovers from the Amber sessions, and if you look real closely, you'll see that the cover depicts a digitally screwed up version of Amber's cover art. Nevertheless, Garbage is generally seen as a transition between Amber and Try Repetae. AllMusic, for instance, calls it a key turning point in Autechre's career and notes that the sound is still rooted in their earliest releases, but beginning to fully flower here.
Yeah, on that note, the Garbage EP is pretty much universally acclaimed, sometimes considered the best Autechre EP of all time. In fact, it's the only bolded Autechre EP on Radio Music with an average rating of 3.72. That's higher than all but a few Autechre albums. And here's one more trivia fact for you. Originally, every song ended with a number corresponding with the percentage of the total EP time that the track takes up. Apparently, it took like a decade for anybody to figure that out. But every release since then, those numbers are gone. So we're not going to try to mention the numbers every time. We'll just call them their normal, unpronounceable names to the best of our abilities. So the Garbage EP, was this somewhat new to you, Dan?
No, because here in America, the CD version of Try Repetae was right. Try Repetae plus, so it had Garbage and Anvil Vapre on it, and when I first got Try Repetae and stuff, it was that version, and honestly, right. I don't think I knew for a while that I always had it on the computer, and I would merge two discs. I always just thought it was one record, probably until I actually started to care about the group and stuff. So I knew Garbage, and then Garbage was, once I got more into Autechre, Garbage is, one of the better EPs. So it is one of the EPs that I'll listen to kind of more frequently especially more frequently than the ones we already discussed.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was I also got the Try Repetae plus first, and but I just thought it was a disc of bonus tracks. I knew that it wasn't. I knew that just the first disc was the album, but I didn't know that it was two distinct releases or something. I would just kind of sometimes listen through those bonus tracks and be wow, these are awesome, but I didn't think of it as its own thing. And then now that I know, I still mostly listen to it just as part of the EP's box set or something. It's rarely do I just start with Garbage Mix and go through to the end of it on its own. So this was, maybe the first time that I was just going through these 4 tracks over and over again and really trying to think of them as a distinct thing, which is probably a shame because it's got a serious flow. It feels very organized, which we'll talk about. So how would you describe the overall sound of Garbage?
I think AllMusic does a pretty good job. That this is it really is kind of the bridge between Amber and Try Repetae. It's got sort of those kind of atmospheric sweeping sort of sounds that we get with Amber, but it's really bringing in the kind of glitchiness of Try Repetae as well. I don't know if it really is just outtakes from Amber or something, or maybe they were outtakes that they
saved,
decided to work or tried to work more on, and brought it up to the style of Try Repetae. But it really does feel the missing link between those two records.
Yeah, I think it's almost a shame. I mean, I know that this is probably nobody's experience in the whole world, but I wish that in some alternative universe I could have listened to Garbage before listening to Try Repetae and Amber, because I have a hard time not thinking of it as a halfway point between these two records, and it makes it feel almost a little disjointed, because I feel Garbage Mix is so... It's very, very Try Repetae territory. Mm-hmm. A weird, pretty distorted, abstract beat kind of constructed out of, a tape on the fritz, a garbled tape or something, just stuff like that. And then it kind of moves into very, very amber territory, like with this like PIOB mix, just tons of delays and like echoes and like just really dense, it just sounds so amber to me. In fact, after like, 2 weeks away from amber, I was surprised to find that I was like kind of missing that ambery goodness. And I was really enjoying like these two middle tracks here because I was like, hell yeah, that's that amber sound. I should note that like when you get to the last track, Vletter Mix, it's a very, I don't know, openly emotive, like synth, synth piece and, almost in sign territory in a weird way. But like much more of a crescendo feel, like more cinematic feel to it almost. That to me is like kind of uniquely amber. So what I'm saying is like, I feel like you get like a Tri Repetae track, you get a couple amber tracks, and then you get like a garbage track. And I almost have a hard time seeing it as like one unified sound. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like why I kind of think of it a little bit of a bridge, because like we said, it doesn't seem so cohesive and one unified kind of thing, because it seems to be like in transition between those two kind of like styles.
Yeah, and it almost like literally, I mean, it's like in reverse, but it almost literally moves from one style to the other, which is like kind of bizarre. When we say it's an EP, I mean, I think it's something we got to address, and we'll probably have to address numerous times again, but it's like 40 minutes long. It's the length of most people's albums. Do you think it's like fair to kind of think of this as like an EP, meaning, lesser than an album? Should it be considered just a release as significant as any other?
Somebody posted on Twitter like a older interview they had done with Autechre. It was some music writer. I can't remember who it was now, but I read through it. I think it was from like 97 or something. And I think it was with Rob, and he says that like basically, he calls the EPs an EP because like legally with the record company, like, they can only release, an album a year or whatever it is. And so it's just sort of like they want to release something, and so legally it has to be called an EP or something. Which, I mean, I'm sure there's some truth to it, especially later on when we get EPs that are, 2 hours, 3 hours long. But, I mean, it's 40 minutes, which is not a full-length record, especially, by Autechre standards. I mean, it is normal standard, not Autechre standards. So, I mean, I think there's at least some sort of thought into it being an EP, it being shorter. I mean, maybe the record label wouldn't let them put 2 discs out, or something, so they had to trim it to 40 minutes or something. Those kind of things are always possible. But I mean, I think with Autechre, it's a little, the line is very blurred between what's an EP, what's an album, what's important, what's not, kind of. I
agree with that, and I read that interview too, and he is kind of like dismissive, like, oh, we just have to call it an EP or whatever, and like, and yet, like I mentioned before, like they seem to be pretty serious about like the distinction, because like they name XI, 11, and it's like
exactly
our 11th album. And if they considered like Garbage an album just under the name of an EP for like contractual reasons, they wouldn't call it 11. Like they're always like reminding you like, this is our album, which means it's a big statement. So I just almost don't even like believe Rob in that interview. Maybe that's how he felt at the time and doesn't feel that way now, but
is that interview before was it before LP5?
Yeah.
I guess he could have changed his mind, because that's the first one that like objectively is called, the number of
I mentioned it earlier, but it's like they're always like a little coy in their interviews. I feel like they're just not telling the truth, like to kind of
it's that unreliable narrator kind of thing. Same thing Dylan does. Another reason,
right? And I appreciate that. I really do. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it has a clear construction. I mean, it feels like Garbage Mix to me would have been like one of the best songs on Tri Repetae if it was on there. It's like an absolute knockout. It is just this. I mean, I don't even know how to like sum it all up, but just like the way it's very Tri Repetae style, like slowly unfurls and like grows, and like these different like there's some of that like string work, from like Silverside, but that appears again on like Letterel and stuff. Just kind of like keeps growing and layering on top of each other. And it's just like such a mammoth, like massive statement, I think. And then, like I said, it seems to move into like increasingly minimalist territory after this like really grand, like absolutely amazingly large track, until you emerge out of the other side of this kind of like weird abstract darkness, with this like really gorgeous synth piece. So it flows like an album, like a really constructed piece. And yeah, my only hang up is like, I feel like the transition from garbage mix into Pyob mix, it's like a little abrupt, It's like almost like they went too minimal, too fast immediately after garbage, which kind of like makes it feel a little bit more of like an assortment of tracks than a perfectly flowing unified piece.
Yeah, I can see that, and I mean, and maybe that speaks to why it's an EP. I mean, when you've only got 4 tracks, 40 minutes to play with, it's harder to like slowly get to somewhere you're going. So maybe it's just a limitation of the medium. But yeah, I could definitely agree with that.
Well, let me quiz you here, talking about best tracks. Not that there's a lot to choose from, but there are three. There are 3 bolded tracks here and 1 unbolded. What do you think that 1 unbolded track is?
All right. The 1 unbolded, probably the last one, V-letter mix.
Really? Are you crazy?
Just because it's more ambient or whatever. I just feel like plebs are not going to go for it.
Well, my sense is that is like one of like the plebs' favorite Autechre songs, because it's like really, really beloved, really highly rated here. It's if you read Rate Your Music, it's like every review seems to like shout that one out, because it is like shockingly emotive. It is like very like openly emotive, and to me it's like kind of a highlight here, because it's like, I don't know, it's almost fascinating because it's got like a it reminds me of like Explosions in the Sky or something, and because basically what you've got are like these like it sounds like the Explosions in the Sky style, like tremolo picking,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of like movement in these kind of like glimmering chords, and they really like swell, like they rise to such like a crescendo, and then they kind of like drop back down with like low pass filter play and stuff, and then they kind of like slowly crescendo again. And it's like, it's funny because I feel like Explosions in the Sky, I mean, they're a little bit after this, I guess, but they are trying to use guitars to make them sound like synths almost, and then here you have Autechre making synths, like almost trying to make them sound like guitars or something, like breaking them up with these like little tremolo sounds. Interesting that like, I feel like they were both going for the same kind of feeling, but like coming at it from the opposite side, which is funny. But it's something I wanted to mention this earlier, actually, in the sense of like, I compared like radio to Swans and stuff. It's like a big part of Autechre's influence on alternative music, which is coming right around the corner here, is like, I don't know, I feel like it almost appeals to rock listeners. Like it's a nice gateway in some of these tracks. Like I feel like that's how it worked for me almost. Like as I was getting into Autechre, there was something about like the building intensity of these tracks that like, it made it an easy way to slide from the rock world into the electronic world. And like the flow of this album overall, but also like the grand post-rock style crescendo of this track, it must have been very appealing to a lot of listeners. I mean, you're like, at this exact time, like Tortoise is coming out, who Autechre will do some remix work with, actually. You've got like, post-rock is kind of about to happen. Do you know what I mean? Like it's kind of, I can imagine being appealing.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure I don't remember exactly, but I'm sure, that was part of the appeal for myself, because, I got into, I love like Godspeed You Black Emperor, and, I was really into Explosions in the Sky, Tortoise, Mogwai, all that stuff, probably around the time I first started getting into Autechre and all, and I'm sure, that really, assisted me into sliding into to Autechre.
Yeah, I mean, is that a highlight for you? Is Garbage Mix a highlight for you? I mean, what are your favorite tracks here?
Yeah, I mean, when there's only 4, it's hard to say. But yeah, I mean, I think Garbage Mix is probably my favorite here. I don't really have any, dislikes. I mean, when there's only 4 tracks, again, it's really hard to choose.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, for me, it's like the first and the last track are the obvious standout. I feel like a lot of people feel that way. I do love, like I said, the ambery goodness of those middle 2 tracks. And yet, I agree that Pyab Mix, it's the lowest rated on Radio Music. And I understand why, because it might be a little monotonous a bit, because it's like, I mentioned on Amber, like there were points where it was like so dense with like so many delays where it's like maybe you're overdoing it a little bit here. And that track is nothing but things just delaying out. I mean, it's got like kind of a tribally drum vibe, but like every drum has a bunch of delays on it. So it's like just echoing and echoing and echoing. Also funny to note that like the little central sound in that kind of like tribal drum vibe is like kind of like a proto radio sound. Like from Radio, there's like this, central sound. It sounds like a hollow tube or something. Like there's like a little, they didn't quite nail it here yet, but it's like they were kind of grasping for that same sound and nailed it on Try Repetae. I think Bronchus 7 mix. It's either Bronchus 7 or Bronchus even mix, whatever. Interesting track because it feels like so drippy and dubby, and like it feels like an Amber song if the song was missing and all you could hear were the delays and the weird reverbs and stuff. I appreciate it conceptually, but I don't know. Do you never get like bored in the middle of these 2 tracks or anything?
I mean, I definitely, the middle is sort of the the more quote unquote boring of it. But I mean, it's so short at only 40 minutes. I feel like there's not time to get bored with it. Yeah. I love this EP. I don't get bored during it.
Yeah, and I appreciate the journey. I mean, I don't think that Valletta Mix would hit as hard if you hadn't waded through that dark territory. Let me ask you though, Blue Shades, you agreed with them about Yuto and the beat there. Do you agree with them about the garbage mix snare rolls, that they're like too normal and annoying?
No, not as much. I definitely feel him on the Yuto. I've felt that about Yuto before he said that. I get what he means with the snare rolls. They are sort of like the kind of normal sound on that. But I think it works better being it's outside of Try Repetae. I think they're less normal than the Yuto ones. We're outside of Try Repetae. We're in this sort of bridge between Amber, Incunabula, and Try Repetae. So I think it's more. I think they're used more subtly, and it's more like allowable in this situation.
Yeah, I feel like I totally forget about them. Like as the track builds and builds, I
really didn't think about it. Like when I read his email, I went back and sort of paid attention to them, and I mean when I pay attention to it, I think I get what he means a little more, but it's not as readily apparent. Like Yuto, like I thought that before I read his email. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I just feel like there's a world of like totally alien and unrecognizable sounds in this track. Like it's just not a big deal, and I don't know. I just love. I gotta say, like the weird, like there's like chirping and squeaking, and I feel like I'm like if you're listening to the the woods, like when you're out in the like camping or something, like it's so loud, like how many bugs and stuff there are. Except for they're all robot bugs, is what I feel like I'm listening to. Great song.
I've never been camping, but I'll take your word for it.
Yeah. Sounds kind of like that in the future, maybe. I also wanted to mention Autechre, who I mentioned earlier, wrote us in his email. He said, in Pyab Mix, someone is clearly saying, "I'm a tractor." I can't find it. I can't hear somebody saying, "I'm a tractor."
I didn't see that email, or at least that part of it, or I would have looked for it. But just thinking off the top of my head, I don't remember saying that.
Well, write us again and give us a clue, because I can't.
Yeah, give us the time you hear that
timestamp. Okay, so do you agree? Just wrapping up here, that Garbage should be considered like one of Autechre's best releases, or do you still feel like it's kind of below the albums?
They have so many good records that it's like I don't, when I try to think like what's their best releases, I always sort of think of, if somebody was wanting to get into Autechre, what would I recommend to them? And I think like Garbage actually does kind of work in that way. I think, its short length kind of lends itself to it. This somebody who's maybe not like adapted to electronic music or experimental kind of things. Like I think 40 minutes of Garbage is a good length, and getting this you get a little bit of a taste of Tri Repetae, you get a bite of amber. It's sort of like if you gave that to somebody, you could say like, did you like the first track the most? How people always make those slow chart kind of things. Garbage is like a perfect, sort of like, if you liked this, go to amber. If you liked this, go to Tri Repetae kind of record. So I think it would be a good, kind of starting point or bridge kind of record. Personally, I don't think I would put it like in the top, personal favorite records, because of that kind of, for those same reasons, I sort of like, if I want Autechre, I sort of want like the whole meat and potatoes of it. If I want amber, I'll listen to amber. If I want Tri Repetae, I'll listen to Tri Repetae. I do like to put this record on, sometimes, but more often than not, like in the context of that larger EPs thing. But I will put it on. If I just reading for a little bit or something. If I only want 40 minutes, but I don't think I would put it in the tip top, of the discography.
Yeah, I don't think it'll beat a lot of albums for me. I appreciate it as a release. I agree that like maybe a new listener would like it, but I also feel like, I don't know, a new listener should get their, head knocked off by the like overwhelming size of Autechre. It's like,
yeah, that is part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to be lost in like the wilderness of Pyob mix and Broncos even mix for a little bit, but you should be lost in that for like a full hour on amber. I mean, that's real Autechre shit. But I do think it's like it's pretty masterful, and it's like it's definitely awesome. We already move on to Anvil Vapre.
Yeah. Just 1 month before Tri Repetae, on October 2nd, 1995, Autechre released the Anvil Vapre EP, again with Warp Records. I guess we could stop saying that. It's pretty much Warp from here on out. But as with Garbage and Amber, Anvil Vapre is comprised of extra material from the Tri Repetae sessions. The critical reception to this EP has been a little mixed. AllMusic gave it just 3 stars, for example, and Sputnik calls it, quote, a relatively simple and toned-down version of Autechre that's good for newcomers. Nevertheless, it's something of a fan favorite with an average rating of 3.55. It's the 3rd highest rated EP in Autechre's discography.
Yeah, so was Anvil Vapre new to you?
No, again, it was part of the Tri Repetae plus. So I knew from that, and it's one of the more famous EPs. So I had to listen to it more. I'll say, it's never been a favorite of mine. So it's not one that I listen to a ton. This is the first time I think I've like spent time with it alone, like over and over and over. It's the kind of record I just would listen to. If I'm blowing through the discography or something, I've never really like sat and purposely digested it before.
Yeah, I think it's the same for me. I've never like sat down and been like, I'm going to listen to Anvil Vapre. It like just sort of comes on naturally
exactly.
as I'm working my way through. So let's try to describe the overall sound of Anvil Vapre. I'll say that it does seem much more firmly in the Tri Repetae realm. I never really even appreciated how much closer Garbage is to Amber than Tri Repetae. But this is like pretty firmly Tri Repetae, and yet it's somehow like even gnarlier, like even more distorted and abrasive.
Yeah.
And much, much more aggressive, I think. Just like really slamming drum sounds. I mean, like high octane. I mean, even stuff like, I don't know, Second Scout, right? Like has like this big thud of a kick drum. It's like always just blasting and booming. It's like kind of that quality that I mentioned in Tri Repetae, but like turned up to 11. I mean, what would you add?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good, definition of it. It really like is firmly Tri Repetae. But yeah, I mean, definitely like more distorted and, and turned up a bit. You know, I mean, we were talking about those inside sleeve, you know, pictures from Try Repetae. You know, the cover of Anvil Vapre is like one of those, but it like, whereas Garbage is like the amber cover glitched. Like this is sort of one of those inner sleeves or similar mechanics, at least, like glitched in the same way. And I think that like is sort of how the you know, the record sounds a bit.
Yeah, that's true. You know, what do you think about Sputnik saying it's simplified and toned down? Because I think I actually agree with that. Like I just had never really thought of it that way, but basically listening to this EP these last 2 weeks, it made me kind of appreciate like Autechre as a whole, or at least Autechre of this period as a whole, in a new way, because I feel like Autechre has this kind of like painterly quality, where, you know, we sort of alluded to it, but it's like they can kind of, you know, when you look at a painting, it's like it's designed in a way that your eye is going to go somewhere first. Like everybody's eye is going to look to one thing first, and then it's going to look around the canvas like in a, you know, in a way that the artist determined, right? You're going to like get to this thing and then to this thing. You know, and Autechre, unlike a lot of musicians, like they have this like absolute skill to do that. And that's how they do the misdirection. You know, that's how you can like not notice that there's melody all over Try Repetae, because like they're distracting you with other, you know, mechanical percussive sounds and stuff. Or sometimes like on the Garbage EP, like on that Bronchus Even mix, it's like sometimes it's like deliberately designed so that you almost don't know what to focus on, and you're just kind of like adrift, you know. But here, I think it's kind of shocking how like straightforward the tracks are. Like there is always like a central melody, and your attention is always drawn straight to it, and the rest of the track is like built around that central melody. You know, so in that sense, I do kind of agree. It's like almost simplified. What do you think?
Yeah, I do agree with that description. You know, it's like you said, you know, Try Repetae like sort of like obscures these melodies and everything. You know, it like makes you think it's colder and more mechanical than it like truly is. Whereas here, yeah, I think that's like much more you know, simplified. You know, like Second Bad Vilble, or you know, the first track,
right?
Like that's just like a pretty much kind of a banger, you know. Like I think the songs on this whole record, like everything's just sort of like, you know, a kind of banging, you know, electronic song. I mean, definitely, you know, it's not like, you know, it still has that like IDM quality or whatever. But yeah, I think it's much more like a, you know, beginner's guide to Try Repetae or something.
Yeah, because I don't know, like Second Skep, it's got like this like nice, kind of like plucky melody, you know, it's almost like a low bass sound or something. And it's very like catchy. It's like kind of masterful in a Try Repetae way, in the sense of it's like a very short loop, but it's like quite mysterious or something. It's like quite intriguing, captivating all the way through, I think. But it's like the thing that I'm clearly supposed to focus on, and it's the thing that my attention immediately goes to. I never forget it's there. You know, like Second Scout has this kind of like wah-wah synth stab thing, you know, that's like a little funky, like quite catchy, and that's the main hook. That's the thing, you know, like on Try Repetae, it's like the main hook is sometimes like the insane sound, like we were talking about earlier. Here it's like always like a melody type hook usually. So it's, I don't know, it's interesting in that way. I don't think that makes it bad, but it's just as like, weird that they seem to have been trying to make just a bunch of bangers. You know, on that note, maybe we can jump ahead since you brought it up, but well, let me quiz you first, actually. What do you think are the, there's only one bolded track here. What do you think it is?
I think it might be the first one, and for the reason that it is in that email.
So it's actually Second Pang, the last track. It's the only bolded track here, although they're all rated quite well. It's a 3.9 or a 4.0 for all these. But yeah, I did kind of want to jump ahead here to the weak points and mention Blue Shades, who also mentioned in his email, Second Bad Vilble is one of the most overrated Autechre tracks of all time. And I think the reason it is so liked is because it is one of the few Autechre tracks with an official music video. You know, I've decided that I agree with Blue Shades. I I think I dislike Second Bad Vilbel, sort of. It's got like this insanely distorted, like straight up harsh noise, like distortion, like just this blast of distortion running through it. And actually really cool, like low drone is kind of like mixed into that. And so I don't know, that might make you think it's like kind of a creative, like boundary pushing kind of glitchy noise track or something. But the core of this song is a very generic, like drum and bass breakbeat or something, right? You get what I consider kind of corny, like little guitar clip samples, what I'm talking about? Like this little blast of like the little guitar hook thing. You even get what is basically like a siren running through like the whole last half of the track, which to me just sounds so like, I don't know, corny rave. Like, let's put a siren on this so people know that they're supposed to lose their shit, like. But what I can't get over is how generic like that breakbeat and that little guitar sample thing is. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I totally agree with Blue Shades here. It is kind of like just a cheesy kind of thing, like we talked about how they said that about like Incunabula and Amber and stuff, but like and we kind of struggled to see the cheese in those records, but like here I kind of can see the cheese a little bit. It really like at times like kind of sounds like a not very good Aphex Twin song, right, but with that like, we'll pause for a second and just, do like some real distorted, noise or something to make it interesting. It almost seems like an attempt to have like, I don't want to say a hit because it's not like they thought this was going to be, top right, 40 or something, but you know what I mean? Like, those underground kind of hits or maybe play at like some weird clubs that would play something, like this. It almost like feels like an attempt at something like that. But I mean, maybe they at least had the good sense not to put it on Try Repetae.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like almost it's like the same animating spirit, which is like, that review that mentioned that like it's sort of a return to their roots of like hip hop and electro and all this stuff. And I feel like there is a lot of that on Try Repetae, but it's been like so transformed and reinvented. Here it's like the same idea, but they just straight up slap a generic ass breakbeat on it. And, I will say in its defense that the like last little bit of the song, that beat gets kind of like changed, and it becomes unrecognizable. You can tell it's composed from the same pieces, but it's been like maybe more Autechreized. But it's maybe like too little too late. It's like just been sort of a slightly generic song throughout, even despite that like absolutely shredded harsh noise stuff, which I should mention my girlfriend who also hates Autechre hates this song maybe most of all. She was like, I hate this song. It's too scary. That sound is she's like, that sound is like the ominous whoosh from Twin Peaks, which is pretty accurate. So are there any high points here? Do you have a favorite track?
I don't know that I have like a specific favorite track here on this EP. In fact, I'll say in general, I think, focusing on this EP, I sort of started to like it less than I always kind of thought I did. I think like before this podcast, I would have said that Anvil Vapre was, like a pretty good, maybe a essential, kind of EP. But I really, after listening to it over and over, I like really kind of started to, I don't want to say dislike it, but just my enthusiasm waned, Yeah.
I kind of agree. It was like the first time I put it on when we, first finished the Amber episode, I was like, damn, this is awesome. Like this is,
yeah.
And then it was like, after several listens, I started to be like, God, they're a little simple and there's just not like enough to kind of like stay lost in over the course of 2 weeks of like tons of listening.
It was hard not to just keep going back to Try Repetae, to be like, oh, I have to listen to Anvil,
Yeah, by the end I started to be like, I mean, I perfectly enjoyed listening to Garbage, but like by the end I started to be like, Whoops, I should probably throw on Anvil Vapre because I didn't listen to it, in a couple days or whatever. I will say that Second Pang is probably my favorite here. It's got like a cool dubby vibe. It's got like that nice metallic, like woozy sound that a lot of those instruments I was praising on Tri Repetae have. But I like how like the beat is like, it's kind of lopsided, in like a dub way. It's like on the 1 and then like on the 2 the next go around, and it's just like a really, I will say that like the track doesn't change much over its like very long running time, but it's certainly like the most interesting, I think, construction here. I forgot to mention, Blue Shades brought up the Second Bad Vilble video. What do you make of that?
I was honestly, I didn't know Autechre had any music videos. So I'm glad he brought it to our attention. But, it was okay. It just is like sort of, it's that Chris Cunningham kind of thing. It was just like sort of random pictures and like a spooky guy. And
it reminded me, it had like a very like grungy 90s. It reminded me of like a Tool video or something.
Yeah, a little bit. I was thinking like, why did they make the, before YouTube, who's gonna, is this gonna be on Much Music or something?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of funny. It's like, I don't know. It's kind of charming in that way. Like it just feels like a very 90s like kind of relic. It does have some of that same like mechanical imagery from like the album sleeves and stuff. And I don't know. It's not bad. I will say that like the track gets kind of like completely butchered for the purposes of the video, like they kind of it has to be like 4 minutes long, so it's just like a few loops of like the first thing, then like a long siren breakdown, a few more loops, long breakdown. It's like a little awkward, but I don't know, I feel like the videos, it's like kind of corny in a 90s way. And I also, as we were talking about earlier, I don't always love when Autechre is giving us some imagery to associate with their work, because I like the like totally freeing nature of having nothing to go by. But that being said, it's kind of fun.
Yeah, exactly. That's basically how I felt about it. I'll never watch it again.
Okay, well, we've kind of already talked about our overall impressions of this. Maybe we should move on to ranking all the stuff we've talked about so far. And on that note, I want to clarify that we're getting a little bit more professional here because in the first couple episodes we didn't have a lot to rank, so we were just kind of like getting to this point and being like, setting it up. But now we're going to start preparing in advance. And I think we're just going to go ahead and rank everything we've talked about. So Dan, you've kind of prepared it in advance. I wonder, with this new stuff added in, maybe you can go like from number 8 to number 1. What is your ranking of everything we've talked about so far?
Yeah, well, I think the obvious number 8 is a Cavity Job, followed by Anti-EP, then Lego Feet, Anvil Vapre, Garbage, Incunabula at number 3, Amber at number 2, and then Tri Repetae at number 1.
Okay, we're almost the same. I got number 8 Cavity Job, 7 Anti-EP, 6 Lego Feet, 5 Anvil Vapre, 4 Incunabula, 3 Garbage, 2 Amber, 1 Tri Repetae.
So just one switched around right there.
Yeah, that could change a little bit, but I don't know. I was just feeling like, maybe Garbage doesn't like flow perfectly, but I just feel like the mastery of the first track especially is like on just another level from Incunabula, and then there's also like a lot to love about those remaining tracks. So I felt like if I was gonna pick something, I would probably pick it. I would probably reach for Garbage before I reach Incunabula. Any closing thoughts on this now quite lengthy chapter of the Autechre journey?
No, it was fun. I had been, once we started this, I was looking forward to getting to Tri Repetae. Obviously it's sort of the big one here. And I had fun digging into it. It was nice, even though I kind of came away liking Anvil Vapre less than I thought I did before. It was nice to like force myself to realize that, sometimes with these EPs and plenty of stuff coming up, I've only listened to a handful of times, or I've always like listened to it in the context of another way of approaching it. And I've never like really sunk my teeth deeply into it, so it was kind of nice to see that I really am not as big of a fan of that as I thought I may have been.
Yeah. Love all this shit. Love this whole period in Autechre. Obviously, Tri Repetae remains one of my favorite albums of all time. that being said, I'm pretty excited to move on to, we're now leaving, I think, the objective classic period and getting into the more, a little more controversy, a little more diversity of opinion about some of the records that we're going to be talking about next, especially the next one. So, I don't know. There's some pressure to like try to talk about Tri Repetae. Like how do I talk about this absolute masterpiece? But
yeah, exactly.
It'll be fun to get into some weirder stuff.
I agree. Well, what do you think about Tri Repetae, Garbage, and Anvil Vapre? Remember, next week we're going to do a bonus episode, and it's going to be all your emails. Plus, we're also going to look at the Base CAD EP, which we skipped because people told us we shouldn't skip it, and we figured, what the hell not. So we'll go for it. So send your thoughts. Let us know what you think on any of those things or any Autechre stuff at all. GONKCastPod@gmail.com. Next proper episode going to be in 2 weeks. Chiastic Slide, In Vain, probably Sickly Sweet. If you guys want it, let us know. Let us know all that, of course. GONKCastPod@gmail.com. If you like the show, help us out, subscribe, leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast. Stay connected. Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, all that junk is at GONKCastPod, although I don't think that's what the YouTube is. Just search GONKCAST Pod. You'll find it, whatever. And we'll see you next time. Not too professional yet. We'll see you next time. See ya.
See ya.